if you have something to say, please do it.
Yes, I was just wondering, James, do the city codes allow for the shared street concept at this time? Or is that one of the code changes you're going to have to implement over the next decades?
We have street cross sections that don't contemplate that, but I guess one of the things that's beautiful in a way maybe about building streets is that when the city does it, we can pretty much do it how we want to. From a local perspective, when you employ federal funding, there are some things that hands start to get tied, but if the city wanted to do that, or if we wanted to consider that with a developer, there's nothing that we necessarily need to change right now. We can just do it.
Anybody else? Amy, you're muted. Make sure you get that.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, what's your length of time for how you hope this plan progresses? Is it like 5 years, 10 years? I mean, what is that? And then the second thing is as you're considering these spaces for residents, how are you factoring in an 8 to 80 approach for the diversity of the population that you'd be attracting there?
That's a really good question. What was the first one?
Just the time period, kind of when you're hoping to have it spaced.
You know, it's already taken 8 years in terms of the work. With an area like this, you know, I'll be honest, I don't know that it's ever done. That it ever finishes. You know, much the same with downtown. You know, if let's say you developed a plan in downtown Conway in the 1930s, we're still building downtown Conway today. Sure. So I think it changes. When do we start to see investment, more investment? I would say likely a lot of the folks are holding off, or that at least is what we've been told by developers, that they're holding off until the street's finished, and that we have that square in there, because those are two things that are going to create part of the amenity that really makes this area so attractive. And that's one of the things that, if you're wanting to develop in an area like this versus maybe in a suburban context, it's about creating amenity. And part of it is, as the development occurs, that's what creates the amenity. But sometimes we have to get it jump started in creating that amenity to encourage those things that create further amenity. Mm-hmm. In terms of 8 to 80, I'll be honest, I can't necessarily speak to everything, all the thought that has gone into that. And so I don't necessarily have a really, really good answer for that in terms of how that approach is.
Has it been on the game plan? I mean, is it a consideration or a criteria in how you're developing, or it just kind of has evolved?
I would say it probably more has evolved. For us, as much as anything, I think accessibility is something that is increasingly important in terms of thinking about that, because a lot of older parts of Conway, we've got a lot of accessibility issues where if someone is in a wheelchair, it's unfortunately tough luck.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you're going to be doing lateral in building a housing kind of thing, I think you're going to have to look pretty carefully at how you design those buildings, or have criteria for the design of those buildings to accommodate the different ages that you hope to attract.
And that's one of the challenges. The last structure that we looked at, the one on Front Street, that's an area of the sidewalk where, to meet ADA requirements, you know, there's step ups in certain areas, and so we said, okay, we want to make sure that you have a nice ADA ramp on the side of the structure to get into where we have access via some way. We've, you know, in some other buildings in downtown, it has resulted where, unfortunately, you know, we've had a situation where ADA access was next to the dumpster, and that is really not what we want to have happen, to be honest with you. So those are factors that we think about.
All right, Corrine, this is gonna be our last one on this, and we're gonna move to the next topic.
Okay, I think it's a really nice, looks like a really nice development, but I always worry about connectability, like walking and biking and connecting to other parts of Conway and ways to connect to other trails. Are in the plans, are you thinking about that kind of thing?
We do have sort of an overall master bike ped plan, I guess you would say, or master pedestrian plan, master bike plan.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the great things that we've done, you know, previously that was really easy is we have other streets that are similar to Markham Street in that they're very wide, and so you know, within a very short period of time, the city was able to go from increasing the amount of bike lanes that it had just simply by taking over and restriping some areas that weren't previously. So yes, that is a personal pet peeve of mine, is the bike lane that goes nowhere.
I'm always concerned that they build these types of areas and then they don't have any connectivity. You know, there's no way for walkers and bikers to get in and out of it.
We have a fairly decent pedestrian network in older parts of the community. We're reinvesting in sidewalks. As it relates to bikes, part of our approach in downtown is to have enough to look at that drivers slow down, that bikes feel comfortable being in the midst of that traffic and sharing the street. And then where we do have areas where it's appropriate and we have wide enough widths that we put in either bike lanes or buffered lanes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, certainly. I've seen some pictures of sidewalks to nowhere where it's like you got this nice sidewalk and then all of a sudden there's nothing, and then it gets to really high grass and it looks really shady and you don't want to walk there. So connectivity is a big deal. But you might want to put a pin in that for our later discussion. Before we go into the discussion of barriers, let me try to share my screen here. So what we have talked about, where did you go? Here it is. Okay, so we've talked about a number of different things, and I've been trying to collate those all into themes, and I've kind of tried to organize them and reorganize them into something that's a little bit more digestible. So some of the things that I'm hearing, let's just hit the numbers real quick before the letters. So we're talking accessibility from a transportation standpoint. We're talking about neighborhood design and placemaking, diversity and community, economic opportunity, and of course the natural environment with green spaces and then environmental stewardship. So these are what I keep hearing. I think these are what I keep hearing as far as what we need to work towards as a region. Certainly transportation and land use are something that we have a direct effect on here at Metro Plan, as we have our influence with the cities that are in our club, essentially. So that's what we focus on a lot. You can also get into the transportation issues with the economy and with the natural environment. They all really work together. So that's good. Obviously what we're going to be focusing on in our barriers discussion. But some of the things that we see that I've heard, connectivity in transportation, obviously the walkability, multimodal connections and accommodations, just the ability to be in diverse neighborhoods with a mix of uses, with quality public spaces, and certainly safety. Safety from a transportation standpoint, certainly you're looking at cars, but also making sure pedestrians have a safe place to walk, cyclists have a safe place to ride their bikes. These are some of the things that I think we're striving towards. So now I want to talk about, and I think we've touched on this in other meetings, so I think this can be a very cathartic exercise. Let's not think about necessarily the solution side, we'll get there, but let's think about what prevents us from achieving these sorts of themes, these sorts of ideas that we've talked about in this meeting. Let me start with, what are barriers to connectivity? That is connectivity for everyone. Let's think multimodal. So whatever's on your mind. Who wants to go first? I think, Corrine, you had some good points that you could probably bring up here. But you have to unmute first.
I think the biggest barrier to connectivity for most transportation, I mean, a lot of it would be affordability, you know, and a lot of it too is the actual community acceptance of this, opposed to, you know, like bus transportation and biking and walking. You know, everybody really wants to do cars. And so you have to think a different way. So the community has to be ready, and you have to sell it to the community. And that's a barrier, because sometimes, you know, they don't want to be sold to. They want to keep using their car. It's convenient for them. And so other modes of transportation are not on their minds. And as long as as the car exists, those other modes aren't important to them.
Absolutely. Messaging is definitely an important. You have to understand why these things are necessary, and it's hard to get everybody on board. So that is certainly a barrier. Does anybody else have anything on connectivity? Because I know there's a bunch of barriers to connectivity.
Well, in this is Anthony Hunter from RDOT. In the same realm of education, I think education really is the base for a lot of issues, because education is going to affect public perception, and that's going to affect political will and existing policy and funding and everything that comes after that. So it's almost cyclical. It kind of builds itself on from the very foundation of education. So
I agree completely. The more people know about things, the more likely they are to enact change. Certainly grassroots efforts, you hear that term all the time. I think transportation probably needs a grassroots effort when it comes to connectivity.
Adding on that, Conway didn't become, you know, the place of roundabouts just out of nowhere.
Right.
It took a lot of that same type of thing that we were just talking about.
Yeah, I think political will, certainly, and that you'll have to get the public involved for the political will to change. I think that's a good one. So anything else? I mean, if we're thinking about connectivity of streets, what are some barriers to that in particular, the way that we develop our neighborhoods? Corrine?
Well, you know, Walter Malone mentioned one time about, I think it was Walter, about cul-de-sacs, and how everybody wants to live in a cul-de-sac, and how cul-de-sacs are hard to connect by street too. So it's actually the form of neighborhoods and the form of the developments the developers use in the first place. So that can be a barrier, because people want to live in certain types of areas, you know?
Right. Yeah, connectivity of streets. I think it's Mayflower, in their subdivision regulations, they actually forbid cul-de-sacs. So that's, you know, a one step towards more connectivity is what that was intended to do. So I think you're right on when you say the form of neighborhoods and the form of our street grid really has a lot of impact on the way that we are connected. So we talked about connectivity. I think this one kind of goes hand in hand. What about the safety? What are some barriers to a safer transportation system? Anybody?
I hate to keep talking, but I think enforcement is one of the biggest things. Education and enforcement because a lot of times for safety, I mean, you've got to have people to call people that aren't doing the safe things. I mean, people aren't just going to be safe on their own. There are rules to follow, but all of us break the rules.
Mhm.
So, if also how you build and how you construct the bike lanes and the sidewalks and how you construct neighborhoods makes a big difference on how safe it can be.
Right.
Like for instance, the road diets have proven, I mean, statistically, the road diets and the roundabouts have proven that all the traffic slows down, the car traffic slows down when you build those kinds of things. And so that's why probably Conway has so many roundabouts, because they're interested in the safety of other individuals that are transporting on the roads, whether it be cars or buses or vehicles or anything. And everybody's got to work together. And I know I'm trying to think of the community in Northern California that is Davis, California, is one of the best examples of safety of multi-use transportation. They've got little stoplights, special stoplights for the bicyclists, and I mean it is expensive to do in the first place, but in the long run, it's going to pay off.
So kind of infrastructure needs as well from the street lights and that sort of safety. I agree. And I certainly can speak to, going to Conway on that 6-lane, nice wide freeway. My foot gets a little heavy sometimes. So it does. It's a psychological thing. You think you have all this space, and it's certainly something to consider. Obviously, the freeway is a different situation. So if anybody has any more on safety, we can do that.
Daniel, I want to ask a question, and maybe Amy might have some input on it, but something to what she spoke about with the 8 to 80-year-old. What 8 to 80-year-olds, what barriers are in place that makes it difficult for an 8-year-old to 80-year-old to move around independently and be mobile?
Here we go. I think the design of the roads and where the housing is and where the vital services are really impact that whole idea of safety, because when you're encouraging people who have limited skills or even lack of transportation, sort of the traditional car, you've got to still have things where they're available to them within short distances, or you have some other mode of transportation that can take them to those vital services. I was thinking about when James was talking, is that area has sort of some anchors, if you think about it, with the Hendricks complex on one end and downtown on the other. You've got some areas where you've got vital services in there, but if they wanted to go to Walmart, you've got to figure out how are they going to get there, and if they feel safe closer to home, but the farther you get from home, it's more the traditional methods of transportation and large highways and lots of volume of cars, etc., then you've kind of thwarted your efforts in some ways. So I think that's what concerns me, is that if it's not a filter in the thinking of these sort of new landscapes or new ways in which we want to build our communities, catching up is hell, because it costs so much more to try to rehab things than to have thought about them originally.
And I think that's actually a good segue into, building a better community to where it's easier for people to safely walk or safely ride their bike, what are some of the barriers to building maybe these mixed use neighborhoods that can accommodate essential services and residents and jobs and everything that you might need? Anybody have any thoughts on that one? I know there are a lot of barriers there. If we want to be honest, obviously political will and developers developing the way they're comfortable with is a big part of that. But can anybody think of anything else?
Well, I think expense is really big. The expense to do it right in the first place. And if you want to do it right in the first place, education comes in, because you've got to educate the people and tell them why you want to do this. You know, if you've got stairs and you don't have curb cuts and you don't have wide sidewalks for the wheelchairs, and you don't have, like for instance, if you have a 4-floor building, apartment building, how are you, if you're old, how are you going to get to the top floor? You know, if you're walking with a cane, or, you know, you're not going to buy something up on the 4th floor. You're going to want something on the ground floor. And so, you know, and then kids that want to ride bikes or walk to school have to have a sidewalk. I mean, you can't put a kid in the street if they're under 10 years old. But if they're over 10 and there's really decent sidewalks, they can walk, they can get to school on their bikes and they can walk.
Right.
So the barriers would be all those things, you know, the stairs,
James, I know you talked a lot at the beginning, but do you see any barriers in Conway I know Conway does some good stuff with their mixed use neighborhoods, but what are some barriers to other areas not being able to get to that mixed use?
In terms of, you know, outside?
Yeah.
I hate to harp on market, but I think in certain respects, we touched on it a bit, that this is sort of a different way of living, and I think there, you know, even within Hendricks Village, it called for a lot more density than what we ended up getting. You know, a lot of it's been a lot of single family in that. So I think to a certain extent, you know, market is there. I think in terms of financing, it's a whole lot easier to get financing for something that has already been done and is proven, and they do it over and over again, you know, within a market. When you're trying to be the developer that goes out there and does something new and different from what that is, particularly in an area that might, you know, hasn't seen a ton of development, that may mean that you're going to have some financing challenges getting that done. So there's those. Obviously, I mean, within zoning, you run into in other areas that this isn't necessarily a Conway thing, but I think is pervasive in a lot of communities. You get the density backlash that, you know, any type of where you have single family, there's, for some reason in zoning, that is considered the most sacred possible thing that has ever existed. And the fact that you might put anything else next to it or near it, you know, in some places starts to blow people's minds. So I think those are some things.
Absolutely. I agree, Patrick.
It seems like there's exist still barriers to mixed use development in a lot of municipalities. That if you wanted to put apartments above your store or above your offices, you've got to go into some weird planned use development. It's extra hoops you've got to jump through, more difficulty. And I'm wondering how easy it is in this area among all the cities to anywhere in a town to put some sort of mixed use. And one of the reasons I think that's really important is people aren't going to be used to denser development until they get used to more things occurring on a plot of ground. And mixed use really contributes to that, I think, because people then get used to going shopping and seeing people walking their dogs in front of the offices and people carrying groceries up to the second floor. And for that matter, how much of the city's encouraging some of these activities through relaxed parking requirements, which can be pretty onerous in some places where you have to have X number of parking spaces per square foot of retail space. And so I'm wondering how much the cities are supporting all of this.
Yeah, I know different cities have different different ways they approach it. From a parking standpoint, I would say that a lot of cities are accommodating or maybe requiring a lot more parking than maybe needed. But and I won't get into that because I can go into that all day. I'm sure many of the planners in the room would. Now, I think we've had a really good conversation. We're kind of in the last few minutes here. I want to give anybody a chance to say anything else. I know I led the discussion in certain topics. Are there any other overarching barriers to just creating a livable environment that anybody can think of? I'm sure there's plenty. I'm sure you'll think of them later. If you do, just email me and I'll try to incorporate that. What you see here on the livability group themes, obviously these are things that we've discussed. I've taken things that y'all have emailed me, discussions that we've had in Zoom, and kind of whittled them down to this format. These are kind of working notes. We also have to remember that there are 2 other groups that are coming up with themes as well. And eventually what we want to do is kind of all come together and figure out some themes to move forward with as 3 bodies. And certainly they're going to have a different spin on some things. And then I think we'll eventually get to a point where we're going to want maybe more specific strategies on how we can achieve some of the things that we, once we get those themes or goals that we end up with, we're going to try to pick y'all's brain, because y'all have a bunch of different expertise on how we might be able to attack these or approach these. As far as the board meeting, there's going to be a Metro Plan board meeting the 26th. Y'all are more than welcome. We stream those on Facebook Live. Y'all are more than welcome to do that. Our group leads will be discussing in general what we've been working on the past few months. And oh, that board meeting's at 10, by the way. So we'll just kind of have a rundown of just general things that we've been discussing, and hopefully we'll get a little feedback from the board and maybe a little bit more direction on which way they want to go. So we'll be looking forward to that. I do appreciate y'all's time here. Does anybody have any thoughts or anything before we adjourn?
Daniel,
Yeah.
could you put up James's video along with the video of this meeting?
Yes, we recorded, now the first meeting, we recorded the entire meeting. I don't know that we recorded James' presentation for this one, but it's gonna all be up there and posted sometime next week.
Okay, putting the video itself up there might make us for a smoother video. I suspect it was video coming through Zoom, and it's got a little bit chunky.
Yeah, it was filtered. It's if you go to the City of Conway, or Conway City of Colleges on YouTube. We've got all those videos. You can see it. You can actually see a video of the Markham Square as well. That it goes into a little bit more detail about all the features that are included in it. It's going to be a really cool. It's different kind of park than what we've ever had in Conway.
In that case, maybe we just need links to the
Yeah.
Conway.
Yeah, we'll get together and send those links out for you.
Yeah,
yeah,
send us the links, and if you could send us a link to the board meeting too, because I'm not even really sure. I guess MetroPlan.
Yeah, it's on MetroPlan's Facebook. So
Okay.
yeah, if you just get on that, y'all are all more than welcome. Now, when you're on Facebook Live, it's an 18-second delay, and I don't think we're really paying attention to the questions if they're coming through. But there is a you can leave comments on there. But yeah, Facebook Live is MetroPlan's page, and that's when we can send all this information out.
Yeah, we would definitely get it out once we get it all together.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming today, and we appreciate James for talking to us. As far as next month, we'll see if we need another meeting next month. We might take a month off. I'll have to discuss it with the rest of the team here. Until our next time, I'll keep you updated, and thanks for coming out.
By the way, thank you, or congratulations to Bernadette. Is she still on?
Absolutely. Yeah, she's on. I forgot to introduce her. Bernadette Rhodes is our newest staff member here at MetroPlan. She's going to be working with small cities. If she's on.
Yeah, I see her.
Yeah, let's.
Wait for us.
Way to go, Bernadette. I'm very happy for you.
Thank you, Corrine. Look forward to working more with you.
I'll be around.
I'll miss you up in North Little Rock.
Definitely.
Yeah, North Little Rock will miss you.
Yes, I'm still living there, so they're always in my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll see y'all later.
Okay, thank you, Danielle.
Bye-bye.